Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Welcome back to the latest episode of the ISO Show. Well, a question that I get every single time somebody asks about an ISO standard is, how long does it take to implement an ISO? Or how long does it take to get certified to an ISO? So in this episode, I'm going to be sharing the things that you need to take into consideration when it comes to timescales for implementing and getting certified to an ISO standard. Which in today's episode, I'll be using ISO 14001 as an example, the environmental standard, but this can actually be applied to most other ISOs. So are you looking to help your business create a system for success and to be kind to the planet and improve your company's brand reputation? Then we're going to be talking about the realistic timescales for making this actually happen. If you're ready to implement an environmental management system to help reduce your company's damage to the planet, you're definitely in the right place. I'm your host, Mel Blackmore, founder of Blackmores and the ISOlogy Hub. And I've been helping businesses to create and build ISO systems for success over the past 15 years. If you're serious about creating a sustainable business, then it's time to put the strategy, systems and processes in place to make it all happen. Join me each week for a candid conversation about practical and profitable ways to introduce systems into your business. So before we begin today, if it's safe for you to do so, download our free ISO Standards Blueprint. This will be so helpful in supporting you to plan, create and launch your EMS, ready for getting certified. So let's dive into today's episode on timescales for your ISO project. So the short and sweet answer is that most businesses take between 6 to 12 months to get certified. But this does depend on the size of your organisation and the complexity of it. So I'm just going to talk you through the different variables involved with that, because there is actually a way that you can implement an EMS in a much quicker time scale. We have had companies that have done that in less than 3 months. And in fact, by using the ISOlogy Hub, the online portal that we've got, you can go at your own pace. So if you want to do that within a few weeks, you can do, but it will take a bit longer if you want to provide evidence of compliance to get ready for certification. But we'll talk about that today. The main thing is to have a clear plan, which is well organised and disciplined. So I'm a strong believer that discipline equals freedom. So if we have discipline, we'll be able to get all of those tasks done. We've got the freedom to get everything done that we need to get done. So I would say it's worthwhile optimising both your internal and external resources. So that would include your environmental champions or your ISO coach, if you have one, if you're looking at using ISOlogy Hub as well, because that could have a detrimental impact on the timescales allowed. So if you're kind of fluffing around wondering what you should be doing, then yeah, it's definitely worthwhile either getting somebody in that does know what they're doing, or finding other people within the business that might have a bit more knowledge about environmental management and ISO 14001. Now, for larger organisations, it can take longer. You may need to take up to 12 months or even longer than that. What you need to do is just consider breaking the project down into incremental phases. So let's say you had 10 locations across different countries across the globe. You may actually decide to break that down into incremental phases, so you actually get certain locations certified in year 1, and then you can have other locations included in the scope of certification in years 2 and 3. So don't think that you have to implement an EMS and get certified across all locations and all services. You can go at your own pace. But ultimately, the scope would be for whatever you have set in your objectives for achieving implementation. What we do find is that some businesses will implement an EMS across the entire organisation, but they might just get certified for part of that business for whatever reason. And I do cover that when we're looking at assessment and getting quotes for certification as well, which is a previous episode. And remember, you can extend your scope of certification at any time, so that can be revisited at the annual surveillance visits that you get. So ultimately what you want to do is to build your ambitions, your objectives, your targets for environmental management and achieving certification into your sustainability roadmap, whether that's within 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. That's entirely up to you as a business. Now, I did mention earlier that you could fast track creating an EMS, but you do need to establish time to gather evidence and make sure that the system is actually working, that it's effective. So it's all well and good you creating that system, but unless you share that with other people, then there isn't much point in having it. So you do need to allow time within your planning to make sure that you can get stakeholder input. That's including the creation, ideally, but then also the launch and the ongoing management of the system as well. So when you're planning your launch, just make sure that you're effectively targeting all key stakeholders. And the general rule of thumb is to allow 3 months post-launch to make sure that that system is fully established. Because when it comes to certification, your certification body will expect to see some evidence, some records. So let's say within your EMS you say that you have provided training for employees. Well, you need to be able to show the evidence of that and the records. And obviously that doesn't happen overnight. That may take you a little bit of time. Same with monitoring and measuring information on your environmental footprint. You need to allow time to do that. So ultimately what you're doing is proving that you walk the walk, and you will allow plenty of time to clearly demonstrate that you're serious about reducing your company's environmental footprint. And finally, one of the things that a lot of businesses don't really take into consideration is the time allowed for the assessment. Okay, so make sure that you have briefed your employees ahead of the assessment of the dates of that assessment. So just consider the timescales for your stage 1 and stage 2 assessment. And again, I've been through what's involved with these assessments in a previous episode back in the day. I think one of the first episodes, it's definitely in the top 10 anyway, when we were talking about what's involved with going through an assessment. So typically stage 1 is done first, and then stage 2 could be a few weeks or up to a couple of months after. Okay, so you just need to manage timescales on that. So you can actually go through stage 2 relatively quickly, straight after your stage 1, but you just need to allow a few days in case there are any findings and you do need to implement any corrective action. Okay, so just bear that in mind. But generally, a couple of weeks between stage 1 and stage 2 is adequate. But then, once you've completed the assessment, you're not actually formally certified as an organisation. There's actually a due diligence process that takes place behind the scenes with your certification body. And it can actually take several weeks before you actually get a copy of the certificate. That's both hard copy and a soft copy. So just try and factor that into your overall plan if you're looking at having a communications plan for celebrating your success at the end of it. Okay, so that's why typically 6 months is a good time scale if you're a small to medium sized organisation, so let's say less than 250 employees. Or you could be looking at 12 months if it's a larger organisation. And also just one other final factor to bear in mind is that if you've already got a management system in place, you could potentially fast track the integration of ISO 14001 if it's an integrated management system that you're developing. So I hope that's been helpful for you today in terms of your planning for implementing an environmental management system and getting certified to ISO 14001. So I'd just like to remind you that the Iceology Hub is now live, so feel free to join us and get access to all the support that you need on our online membership portal, the Iceology Hub. It's the one and only go-to place for all things ISO. So we've got video tutorials on there, check sheets, quick wins. We've even got a module on timescales as part of the planning stage it's the stage 1. Okay, so we take you through all 7 stages of Iceology in the Iceology Hub. So there's everything that you need in there to create, launch and build your ISO system for success. So I hope you've gleaned some useful information from today's episode. And I'd love to hear if you had any kind of takeaway moments or useful hints and tips that you'd like to share with us, because it is really important that we get a grasp of what it is that you're actually looking for further information on, so that we can continue to provide these podcasts for you. If you obviously didn't manage to take any notes during the podcast because you might be driving or walking the dog or something, don't forget our show notes are available over on the Iosology Hub. And if you don't want to miss out on any future episodes, please make sure that you're subscribed so that we can make sure that you don't miss any episodes on your favourite player, whether that's iTunes or Spotify, YouTube. And finally, don't forget your free ISO Standards Blueprint, where we do cover timescales, and there's actually a planner within that on timescales, so that you can get your ISO management system kick-started. So thanks very much for listening to the ISO show today, and I look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.